I want every tour to feel like that you flew into a city, you're meeting up with one of your best friends, and they're just going to take you around and show you the best donut places, and you're going to eat some donuts and learn a little bit of history and have some fun. And that's it. And that was how the first tour went. And but I will say, like, all that stuff aside, I was nervous as hell.
Welcome to the Tourpreneur Podcast. Travel industry veteran Shane Whaley will take you on a journey with fellow tourpreneurs, sharing their tips, ideas, insights, and success stories to inspire you to make your tour business the best it can be. And now, please welcome your host, Shane.
Hi, and welcome to episode 7 of the Tourpreneur Podcast. Number 7 is a very special number when it comes to podcasting, okay? You're probably scratching your head and wondering, what on earth has 7 got to do with podcasting? Industry veterans in the podosphere report that many podcasts pod fade by their 7th episode. By pod fading, it basically means they cease production, right? So I'm sure you've discovered this before. You found a really cool podcast, you really enjoy it, and then they don't produce any more episodes. And there's lots of reasons why that can happen, okay? So I would love you to do me a favor. I would love for you to show us a bit of love for the show. If you're enjoying what I'm trying to do here at Tourpreneur, drop me an email on tourpreneurshow@gmail.com. I'm open to suggestions, constructive suggestions, guest suggestions. Is there a question today with Jeff, for instance? Is there a question you were dying for me to ask him that I didn't? Let me know, because I'm not a trained journalist. I'm just the nosy so-and-so, right? I'm just very curious about our tourpreneurs. Feel free to retweet out or tweet out about the show at Tourpreneur Show. Share us on Facebook. And more importantly, share us with your friends and colleagues in the tour industry. If you think they would get something out of our episodes, please let them know that we exist. And then I'll be back for episode 8, okay? Today's show, Jeff Woelker is the founder of the Underground Donut Tour. He started his first donut tour in downtown Chicago 4 years ago, and he's recently expanded into New York City, Philadephia, Portland, and Seattle. So on this episode, we talk about why he decided to create a donut tour in Chicago, what led to him expanding to other cities, and how he built his donut tours from scratch. Because let's be honest, donut tours is a very niche sector. So he's a brave guy doing this, as all you tourpreneurs are, especially those of you who are doing something a little bit different. So on episode 7, and you can find all the show notes at tourpreneur.com/7, we're going to pull back the curtain on Jeff's underground donut tours. I hope you've eaten, because you might get hungry on this one. Welcome to Tourpreneur, Jeff Woelker. How are you?
I'm great. How you doing?
I'm wonderful. I'm really pleased that I've had my dinner tonight, because I have a feeling, talking to you about your tours, I'm going to get really, really hungry.
That's probably the case, yeah.
Because you are the man behind the Underground Donut Tour.
That's right.
And I first came across you. I read an article which I included in our Tourpreneur Daily Briefing where you were expanding to Philadelphia. This was a wee while ago. So I thought, I love this, because Tourpreneur is about the stories of tourpreneurs, especially those of us that have tours which may be a little bit different. We hear a great deal right now about the evolution of tours and people looking for very different things rather than just the standard tour. So I'm really intrigued to talk to you more about the Underground Donut Tours. How did this all get started, Jeff?
I think the main thing is I'm secretly, maybe not so secretly, I'm a fat kid at heart. I've always had a love for sweets, for savory items. I mean, specifically for donuts. My wife and I travel a lot, and we went to a couple different countries. We've been to Spain and Argentina and Mexico and a bunch of places. And everywhere we go, we always try food tours or artist tours or just different tours that are in those countries. And we went on a couple of these, and I came back and I was thinking, how can I love donuts. How can I turn this into a business and potentially, take one of those ideas for a food tour? And that's sort of where it came from. I was posting a lot of stuff on social media across, Facebook and Instagram and all these different sites. And a lot of my friends were ribbing me about it and saying, are ridiculous around donuts. You just need to like start your own business. And that was the nexus of it. So I started the Underground Donut Tour about 4 years ago at this point, just as really a hobby, as a side gig. I didn't really think it was going to become that much. I thought, I might run it for a couple weeks or a couple months and see how it goes and then just play it out from there. And I mean, I was 50-50 of whether I was going to actually like keep it running or not. And then, I launched in Chicago and I got a couple hits from press and it just started taking off. And I was running it by myself for about 2 years and it just got to be too much. And at that point, I actually hired some guides and it's just been growing. To your point about Philadelphia, it's been growing over the last couple of years. And we just recently expanded to Philadelphia and we're actually expanding to other cities as we speak.
Great. Well, I definitely want to dig into that with you. I want to take you back to those early days. And I think we, as a traveler myself, I'm really pleased that tourpreneurs have friends who push them to do this. And I'm hearing this more and more. We just had Joris on the show who runs battlefield tours in the Netherlands. And it was his friends who said, oh, you're a brain box on this stuff. You should be doing tours. And now he's running a business doing that. And I think sometimes if we don't have that peer pressure, maybe we wouldn't get started. Can you talk me through those early days? So how did you come up with the tour? How did you devise it? How did you market it?
So the tour started in Chicago. Here in Chicago, there is a huge food scene. I mean, I would wager to guess some of the best food, if not the best food scene in the U.S. And because of that, there's always people that are trying different things and trying to push the limits of gastronomy. And it was taking place in the donut scene too. There were a bunch of artisanal donut places that popped up probably about 4 or 5 years ago. And all of them were, they were coming on the scene. They were trying out new things. They were trying new business models. There's one in Chicago that started in a food truck specifically. There's a couple that were spinoffs from larger restaurant conglomerates. And I had been to, I think pretty much all of them before I even started the tour. I think I'd been to all of them and tried donuts from all of them. And then it really just became down to, I wanted to create a curated experience for my guests. So, I wanted to whittle it down because, sometimes specifically when you're on vacation, you end up going to a lot of these places and you look at the menu and there's 50 different choices and no one ever wants to feel like they choose the wrong thing. And so I, through my friends, through social media, through review websites, essentially I looked at what do people really talk about and care about at each one of these places. And that's how I selected, the top donuts from each one of these places. And a lot of them have been awarded. A lot of them are the most Instagrammable or the most tasteful or the most highly reviewed on all these different websites. And so we took all that information together and that's how we built the tour. I mean, the other components about it, it had to be logistically feasible. It's a walking tour. We can't walk from, downtown all the way up to Lincoln Park or somewhere that's really far away from downtown. So we had to find places that were logistically feasible and also had the right atmosphere. I mean, they had to be open and willing to have tour groups come there on a regular basis. They have to have a good atmosphere. And so we started with 4 places. And it's just been, like I said, it's just been growing ever since then.
And what was the reaction like to the donut vendors when you approached them about the donut tour idea?
To be honest, a lot of them were skeptical when I first approached them because they thought, oh, this is just some kid and maybe this is going to work out or maybe it's not going to work out. And they had previously been burned by other vendors or other partners. Some of them were already on tours, not necessarily specifically a donut tour, but for instance, there is a chocolate tour here in Chicago. And what they do is they go to various chocolate places and they have like chocolate cake and chocolate ice cream. And then they had a chocolate donut. So it was tangentially related, but there wasn't specifically a donut focused tour and they were really excited and interested about it again with a skeptical eye. But now I think they consider me a real partner to their business because we are selling out tours. The scale that the company's getting to at this point, I need to add. So right now we run Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and I have to add more days and I have to add more times because we are consistently selling out. now, which is March in Chicago, and I can't even imagine what's going to happen in June, July, and August in Chicago. We're going to have multiple more days and more times.
What a wonderful problem to have.
Yeah, totally.
And how are you getting the word out? Particularly, let's rewind. Let's go back 4 years. So you work out the tour, you arrange it with the various donut sellers. How did you then get the word out? How did you market your tours?
So I have a bit of an edge to, I would say, most people who are starting tours. I mean, I come from a digital marketing background, so it makes it much easier for me. So I know how to register a website. I know how to build and manage a website. I know how to, I actually worked for a word of mouth agency. So I knew how to do PR and social media and all of this stuff. So, I mean, I would say that it was much easier for me to do this because I understood the power of social media and online word of mouth to get these things going and to get people talking about it. And then also the right outlets and channels to be on, to make this thing a success. So I would say that there was still obviously a learning curve. I did not know anything about the hospitality industry or tour industry or running, events for the most part. I had to learn all that stuff on the fly. And I started, for anyone who's listening, I would say I would start small and start with a limited amount of risk, and go from there, and then scale up as you find the demand starts to take off.
And what advice would you have to fellow tourpreneurs who might be setting up and they know nothing about digital marketing? Are there any channels that you prioritize over others or think are more advantageous for tourpreneurs?
Yeah, I think lately, the first thing that I would do is I would find a good website platform that you feel comfortable with. I know that there's probably some developers that potentially will be listening to this, but you don't necessarily need to go out and hire a team of developers or a web marketing agency. There's a lot of things that you can do yourself, whether it's through, I work through Squarespace. I have worked with them since day one. And again, because I can code and I can develop websites, but I want to focus my energy on other things. And so I went on Squarespace, I picked a theme, and I threw in some content and I said, let's go. Because I wanted to fail fast. If this business was going to potentially go down in flames, I wanted to know in, a couple of months. I didn't want to build a website for 6 months and then all of a sudden I find out the website doesn't work, or the business is going to take off. So I would start there from a website perspective. And then from a marketing perspective, I would focus primarily on Tripadvisor. Tripadvisor is the primary channel that we get bookings through. Obviously, we work with everybody these days, with Get Your Guide, with Expedia, I can't even remember. There's a number of partners that we work with, but Tripadvisor is the one that gets the majority of our bookings for us.
Yeah. No, I think that signifies. And in fact, I was looking at your Tripadvisor reviews earlier on today, and you must be over the moon because you have 72 reviews, you 5-star rated, and I think out of those 70 reviews, 68 are very good or excellent. That is amazing, Jeff. Congratulations.
No, I totally appreciate that. But I will say that that's not without hard work.
Yeah.
There have been people on the tour in Chicago, even recently, and in Philadelphia. So Philadelphia, we just launched, and we thought we had the tour. We thought we had the good tour in a good place. We thought we had the right amount of donuts. It's always a balancing act, because you don't want, with a donut tour, you want to give people enough donuts, but you also don't want people to be getting sick at the end of the tour. And so it's always a balancing act for us. And we erred on the side of not having enough. We erred on the side of not trying to make people sick. And people came on the tour and they said, no, we want way more donuts than this. So we said, okay, fine, we can do that. And so we have now since scaled up the amount of donuts that we have on the tour, and the reviews have directly, we've seen a direct correlation between our changes to the tour and the ratings that have come in. Our first week in Philadelphia, we got killed. We had several 1-star or 2-star reviews. Again, because I come from a word of mouth background, I know the power of reviews that can either, make a business a total success or can kill a business. And, for us to have multiple 1-star or 2-star reviews, on Philadephia right as it's getting started, that would have killed the whole business. So proactively, I reached out to all these people. I gave them my contact information. I said, we'll gladly refund your money. I will bring you back on the tour when we make some changes for free. And all pretty much every single person that I reached out to responded positively and said, you know what, I totally appreciate your feedback. I appreciate you reaching out to me and like trying to make a difference, and make sure that we had a positive experience. Like and to be honest, that's the whole reason that I started the business, is not to make a ton of money. It's really to share my love of donuts and make sure that people have a good time on the tour. So I don't mind and I post this on our website and in all of our marketing materials, that we have a 100% money back guarantee. If you come on the tour and for whatever reason you have a bad time, even if it's outside of our control, we will refund your money 100%.
Wow. That's impressive.
I mean, it's the thing is, I put myself in my customer's shoes, and I would want the same thing. Like if I went, let's say that I went to Seattle and I went on a food tour and I didn't have a good time, because I know how this business works, I would probably end up reaching out behind the scenes. But if I don't understand how the business works, through a review is the best way that I can get feedback to a business owner. And so I hope that they would take my feedback to heart and maybe make some changes or make some allowances to make the tour a better experience.
And how do you go about encouraging people to leave you reviews on Tripadvisor?
That is still something that we're working on even today. So when people come on the tour, we will email them 24 hours after the tour to say, hey, if you had a great time, please go on Tripadvisor and write us a review. And there's a link for them to go write a review. And we actually, there's a number of ways that you can do that, but I try to make sure that I link directly to the review page, which Tripadvisor does a good job of making it mobile friendly. So my hope is that even if they're on their mobile device, that they can go on there and write a review. It only takes a minute or two, depending on how much feedback they leave, but it really doesn't take long at all. Really, all I want to see is that people give us a star rating, and then they potentially can give us a comment as well. But if they can give us, a 4 or 5 star, that would be fantastic. But it's a tricky thing because you want to ideally. I've done a lot of thinking about this. Like, should we have iPads at the end of the review to have people fill it out, or should we text them about the review after the tour is over? I mean, there's all these different channels that I'm trying to figure out and trying to explore, but also not. I'm trying. I actually have my master's in human computer interaction, which is essentially breaks down to usability. So I'm always trying to look at things through the lens of usability and making it as easy as possible and also as innocuous as possible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's something that a lot of tourpreneurs struggle with because, you push the iPad in front of somebody, they might feel uncomfortable or you're being pushy. And obviously the reviews, the most genuine when people get back and they're like, oh yeah, I really want to recommend this tour because it was such a fun time. Moving on from the review side, so you said you worked with lots of OTAs like Expedia and Get Your Guide. How did that come about? And when did you start working with them, after you launched the tours?
Yeah, so for the last, probably 3.5 years, we've primarily been working with Tripadvisor. And that was our, it was bookings either came in through our website or Tripadvisor, and that was it. So probably in the last 4 or 5 months, I recently switched over to Fair Harbor as our ticketing platform. And I actually didn't even, I come from a technology background. I actually didn't even know that a lot of these OTAs were integrating across each other at this point, and creating essentially like a ticketing ecosystem, which is impressive to see. It's actually a lot of fun to be riding the technology life cycle here. And, like through Fair Harbor, they actually have all these integrations right out of the box. So Expedia wasn't even on my radar. Get Your Guide wasn't even on my radar. It was really just Tripadvisor. And when they sold me and they said, hey, we actually integrate with Tripadvisor, so you don't have to keep an eye on bookings across all these different platforms. You can just have one platform and all the bookings will come in together. I thought, oh, that's great. And then they mentioned, oh yeah, we have partnerships with all these other OTAs. And I thought, well, this is fantastic. I'm going to start signing up on all these different ones. And honestly, I want to do it for all the cities, but it takes a while. it's still sort of a headache from an integration standpoint, because you have to go and talk to all the OTAs and tell them what tours to integrate. And then you have to talk to Fair Harbor, and then you have to talk. I mean, it definitely takes a lot of time and effort. I don't mind it. But I know that there hopefully very soon will be a replicate button or something where it's just like, I want to create the tour on one website and then just push it out to all these different websites in one shot.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. And I think a lot of tourpreneurs are asking for that as well. And, in terms of the OTAs, the online travel agencies, a lot of them have strengths in different areas. So for instance, if you were to launch a donut tour in, say, London or Paris, then definitely Get Your Guide would be very strong because they're European. Will they sell you much in Philadelphia right now because they are so European? I don't know. 2 years, that will change as they grow their business. So each OTA, I think, has their speciality in terms of where the customers are coming from and going to.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. The most of the bookings that come in we only have the Chicago tour listed on Get Your Guide right now. I will add the Philly one here in the next couple of months, but primarily the bookings that come in are either from UK or Germany, primarily. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And in terms of content, I'm curious to know, because I've never actually used the Fair Harbor system. I should ask them for a demo. In terms of your content, your photos and your tour maps and everything else, how do you communicate that content to all the different providers that you sell through?
I mean, it's really just a lot of heavy lifting. It's copying and pasting. That's what I mean about like replicate. I wish their functionality existed where I could set up the tour on Fair Harbor once, where I can say, here's all the photos, here's the description, here's the map, here's everything, and then just push it out to Tripadvisor and Get Your Guide. Because right now I have to essentially go into each platform and copy paste all of this information. I mean, it's the same information. I'm just copy and pasting it into each system. And there's, all that does is that just invites risk, and that I have a typo somewhere, and I forgot to cross a T somewhere, and all of a sudden somebody shows up to the wrong address. I'm like, oh goodness, I intended for that to be for this other tour, or it puts a lot of risk in the process that doesn't need to be there.
Yeah, sure. In terms of the content, there is one company that's just started up. They're in beta, called Magpie. They're at magpie.travel, and actually one of the investors is the founder and former chairman of Viator. And he was interviewed on our show in our last episode, it was a special episode. I didn't even put a number on it, but I'll add it to the show notes, which everyone can find at tourpreneur.com/7. So they've set this system up because they recognize that getting the content to everybody, especially if you have to, if you change your tour route or you go to a different donor vendor, you have to go and change that everywhere.
Yep.
Or the menu or whatever else, and that's a real pain. So that
absolutely.
And I'm not paid to say that. I'm just passing it on. I thought it was a great service.
Yeah, I'm going to go check it out after this.
Yeah, great. I know we're zigzagging here, but this is brilliant. So the first tour you ever took, were you scared? I mean, you sound like a really confident guy, and you clearly know donuts. How did you feel when you led your first tour?
I mean, I won't lie to you. The first tour that I gave was, it was great. The tour was great. It was so much fun. I invited, I think like 8 or 10 of my best friends. They all came on the tour. It was exactly the mood that I needed to have and I needed to set right from the get-go, because that mindset and that feeling is something that I've carried to every single tour since then. I want every tour to feel like that you flew into a city, you're meeting up with one of your best friends, and they're just going to take you around and show you the best donut places, and you're going to eat some donuts and learn a little bit of history and have some fun. And that's it. And that was how the first tour went. But I will say, like, all that stuff aside, I was nervous as hell giving the tour. It was I do public speaking on a regular basis. I worked in a marketing agency. I'm familiar with giving media pitches and marketing pitches to executives and CEOs, and I've done this a ton of time. But the thing about the first tour that I gave, I didn't want anyone to, no one ever wants to feel stupid, and so I was always worried about, well, if somebody comes on the tour and they know more about donuts, or they know more about the city, or they know more about something else, and all that's going to happen. And I got over that pretty quickly. And the more that I interacted with people, it's really just celebrating their knowledge and their appreciation for what you're doing. I mean, we've had pastry chefs that have come on there and it's funny, they've critiqued the dough. They're like, oh, my dough is so much better than this, or they're using the wrong ingredients for such and such. And I mean, I make donuts and I appreciate donuts, but I don't have that level of understanding of the process, and I can appreciate that they do. So that was great. And then we've had people who have owned donut shops, and they're coming on there and they're saying, oh man, these guys really got their business model down, and they really, they're doing great throughput and great business. And there's just always so many interesting people that come on the tour, and so I mean, all that anxiety after the first, 1 or 2 tours where the whole thing wasn't a disaster, I thought, you know what, I think I figured something out here, and I think we can keep doing this. What I will say is the first tour that we had, my wife and I, my wife came on the tour with me, and we went on the tour. We ate the same donuts as our guests, and then we came home, and I slept for probably like 3 or 4 hours. 1 from all the sugar, and 2 from the anxiety and the adrenaline. And I just crashed for several hours. And then we woke up when both of us looked at each other like, what the heck just happened? So yeah, it was a fun time, but the first couple of times it was definitely a nerve-wracking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hear this from all tourpreneurs who really know their stuff. It's that fear of the unknown. It's the imposter syndrome creeps in when it shouldn't. It's incredible to hear the stories, which is why I always ask it. What would you say surprised you the most after your first few weeks of operating or your first few months of operating? I
think the pricing. The pricing was always a question for me, and it's still sort of a question. I did a lot of research, looking at tours in Chicago and other cities just to see comparative tours and similar price point products. What were other tour operators charging, and I tried to peg it on the lower end of the market. So usually when you go into any city that we operate in, we are usually one of the lowest cost, or if not the lowest cost tour that's in those cities. And so because I donuts are not that expensive, and there's not a lot of overhead with our business. So I figured out a model that works. And I mean, and I will say that I have talked with, right now we have 8 employees that work for the donut tour. We have a few here in Chicago, Philly. We are in the process of starting in Seattle, Portland, and New York City. And so I have people there as well. And compared to talking to my employees and talking about some of them work for other tours, and I've looked at their, through the employees, I've seen some of the compensation models and the revenue models that some of these other tours have. And I'm not skimping on labor. I mean, I will pat myself on the back for that. I make sure that I pay my employees very well and that they're compensated the right way, and even bringing them on to be partners in the tour as well. So, but the pricing, that was always the biggest question. I've only had maybe 2 or 3 instances where somebody has said, oh man, this is sort of expensive, or it was too expensive, or we didn't get enough value out of it. And a couple of those have recently come in with Philly. And so we adjusted there to give people more donuts. And anytime it does happen, I always lean on my refund policy. If somebody feels like they don't get the full value or enough value out of the tour, absolutely, here's your money back, no questions asked.
I was just at Arrival Berlin, and there was a whole workshop on pricing. And what was interesting to me was I was observing, because obviously I don't run a tour myself, and I was observing the reaction. And it was the guy who's the CEO of Booking Kit in Germany, and he'd interviewed his customers on pricing and put all the data up. And it was funny that the whole room was split 50-50 on pricing strategies and anchor pricing, and up. He was talking about the upgrading as well and upselling. It was a really, I loved it. I loved that session. Sure. I wish they'd had more time for it, because that's the one thing I think a lot of tourpreneurs struggle with, especially for yourself, Jeff, where you were the first game in town when it came to donut tours, right? So it wasn't like you were doing a history walking tour or a pizza tour. It's not like you can go, well, they're charging $25, so okay, I can land around that price.
Right.
It must be very tough.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember where I heard this phrase. But really what it comes down to is share of stomach. I mean, and when you're, people can only eat so much when they're on vacation. And so you're going to, when you start, for instance, I planned a trip, I'm going to New York City, for instance, or whatever it is. I know that I need to do some stuff when I'm there. So I look at the things I can only do something for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So I just look at some of the other tours that are running around breakfast or lunch or in the afternoon and say, how can I compete against these guys? And pricing and my offering, both have to be competitive. And to your point about being the first, the offering is super competitive because there aren't a bunch of other donut tours. So that's pretty easy. What I also want to do is make sure that I win on pricing, I've just made a choice where I will try and win on volume versus a single price. And I've thought about the upgrades and the upsells, but I don't know, depending, I can't speak for every single tour, but for me, I haven't figured out the right way to do it. So it doesn't come off as cheesy or hokey.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you've already bought this tour, but here's, this thing that you can buy on top of it. I just haven't figured that out yet. Again, to make sure that it's a good experience for my guests.
Yeah. And I mean, although I'm saying you're the first game in town, I guess in your shoes, you do have competitors in that if I'm in Chicago for 2 nights, one night I might want to go to the baseball. I'm going to be at the baseball. The second night I might want to do the pizza tour. You're competing against all these other food tours and other forms of entertainment that are going on in the city, right? So I think that's also a challenge. Though I think people in general, it's not so much the price of the donuts, it's the experience they're getting. So if they have a really fun tour guide who creates a really good mood, a really good experience, lots of anecdotes and so forth. For me as a traveler, that's what I'm paying for. If I'm going for a 10-course Italian tasting meal, it's different. But if I'm going on a donut tour, I'm kind of going for the experience as well as, or maybe even more so than the donuts. It's just something fun to do.
Yeah, 100%. That's you're exactly right. I mean, that's where a couple times people have dinged us and they said, "Oh, you don't need to go on this tour. Here's all the stops and blah blah blah." But inevitably that's going to happen with every single tour. You can go to any tour online and you can find somebody they were just angry or upset or for whatever reason that day they were just in a mood and they're taking it out on the tour, which is, I mean, sometimes it just happens. But you're 100% right. I mean, that's why when whenever we travel, we try and put some sort of tour at the front end of our trip. And the reason for that is because then you can sort of lean on the guide or your host to give you some ideas for what else to do. Hey, maybe I'm on a donut tour, but I don't know where to go to dinner for tonight, or I don't know what things to do this weekend, or whatever it is. Like, what site should I see? You have obviously you can go to Google and ask all those things, but it doesn't have the same effect or the same sort of clarity that a human being standing right in front of you can provide. So I think you're 100% correct. Some people think about it in terms of, well, it's 4 donuts times X dollars, blah, blah, blah. And they try and like reverse engineer the pricing. Or they can just look at it as, no, I mean, I'm paying for somebody's time. I'm paying for somebody's expertise and the curated experience that you're talking about. For somebody to tell me, hey, when I walk into Fire Cakes in Chicago, what is the best donut that I should have there? And then you have this expertise that you're paying for to say, oh man, I went to Fire Cakes and I had, the best donut. I had their Tahitian vanilla glazed donut, which has been awarded numerous times, numerous years. But I wouldn't know that if I just walked in there off the street. Like, I would look at their shelf and say, well, you guys got, 15 different flavors. Which one should I get? And hope that the person behind the counter recommends the right thing.
Never miss an episode of the show. Subscribe at tourpreneur.com/subscribe.
Yeah, absolutely. And if any of our listeners hear any funny noises, that's my stomach rumbling at hearing at these wonderful flavors that you have up there. And I also think, from my own travel is, I've done this before where I've gone on a tour on the first night and then we've gone back to one of those places the next night because the pizza was so good or the donut was so good or wherever. It's so good you want to go back and have it again on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And that's a lot of times people have told me that through reviews or just as follow-up emails that there was one guy who, I think he was in town for 3 or 4 days, and he went on the donut tour the first day he was here. And then he said, oh man, I went back to Stan's Donuts every single day after that because they have so many great flavors. And I tried the one from the tour multiple times. And yeah, you're exactly right.
So you were saying you have 8 employees. At what point did you realize you needed more employees?
I mean, really, it came down to trying to scale the business. I mean, we hired our first employees here in Chicago, mostly because I still have a full-time job. I was working a full-time job. I had tours on Friday that I couldn't cover anymore. So I wanted to bring on some guides, and I wanted to scale the business for more days a week and to run private tours. And there was a limit. There was a physical limit to how much I could actually handle myself. And so I brought on some guides here in Chicago. And then there's a really nice guy from Philadelphia who was actually in Chicago and saw the donut tour in action. And he came up to one of our guides and said, hey, what's going on here? What are you guys doing? And our guide said, hey, it's a donut tour, and you can go online and you would buy tickets and such and such. And he said, oh man, I'm going to reach out to you guys. I want to start one of these in Philadelphia. And so he was actually the catalyst for us getting started outside of Chicago. So he said, yeah, I'd like to partner with you guys and bring it to Philadelphia. And once I went through that exercise of actually scaling it to Philadelphia, I thought, oh man, there's really no, I mean, as long as I can find a city that has enough donut places, there's really no limit to how much we can scale this thing. And so that's what we've been doing over the last couple of months, is really scaling it up to those other cities and bringing on and training new employees to help out.
Yeah, I guess that the question I have for you is, how do you go about recruiting tour guides for your business, knowing that the way you like to lead tours and the service and dedication to quality that you deliver, how did you go about hiring others?
So the first channel that I use is Indeed. I will post a job on there. I mean, I have used Craigslist to post jobs in the past. I don't think you get as quality of I mean, other people might think I'm wrong here, but Craig, I haven't found the quality of candidates on Craigslist that you do on Indeed. Indeed is free, which is great. I post my candidates on there. I get a surprising amount of resumes. I mean, I think for every job posting I put out there, I will probably get anywhere between 150 and 200 candidates. And so that becomes a problem in and of itself, is that to your point, how do I filter through those people? Because all I have is a digital version of them. I don't really know anything about them other than the resume they've submitted. So I will then filter through all those things to figure out who the best candidates are. Ideally, they're people who already have some tour guide experience. I typically look for people who also potentially have like hospitality expertise or have any sort of like stand-up comedy or theater experience. Because I mean, that's really what you have to entertain people for 2 hours and make sure that they have a good time. So after I've filtered through those folks, then I actually do a phone screen, and then I'll typically meet them in person. And then I'm a pretty good judge of character, so I can usually tell who's going to be a good fit or not. And really, I think a key component of it is I want to find people who I want to hang out with. They need to have, a spark about them that if I want to hang out with them, I know other people are going to want to hang out with them. That's really what it comes down to. I've interviewed several people who are just really flat and just not. They can't emote. They can't keep people interested in what they're saying. So it's you need to have some semblance of a personality and a little bit of an extrovert to be able to do this. And so that's the methodology that I've used. I'm sure that there's a bunch of HR folks that are listening and are like, you need to do something better than that. But it hasn't failed me yet.
Did you know every weekday Shane curates the most interesting news articles in tours and activities and sends them out in a snappy daily digest? Grab your copy of the Tourpreneur Daily Briefing at www.tourpreneur.com.
And how about your training? How does that look?
So it's getting, with each new hire, it's getting better and better. We have a script that we work from. I would say that I'm not very strict with the script. It's a general story, but what I want each of my guides, and this is, when I hire and these other cities. I want people who actually live in the city, people who, to what we were talking about earlier, if somebody comes up to you and says, hey, these are great donuts, but like, where should I go for dinner later? Or, what show should I see or something? You can't just freeze up. I want them to, they need to have an opinion and an understanding of the city they live in to be able to give some guidance around this stuff. And that's, I want to make sure that the script is loose enough that they can also provide their own personal anecdotes. Like, as they're walking past a donut shop or a movie theater or a, restaurant, like, oh man, I met my wife here, or I, went on my first date here, or I went to high school over there and, all the kids went to this movie theater. I mean, to be able to add those sort of anecdotes, it just makes it more like a real thing than just I'm a robot, I'm walking around the city and I don't deviate from the script.
Yeah. This is what I'm hearing from tourpreneurs, that it really does come down to passion and enthusiasm for the subject, right?
Yeah, exactly. 100%.
So the Philadephia thing, did that just happen because, the chap approached you about it? Or were you thinking, well, already that, okay, I have this success model in Chicago, I can take this to other cities? Can you talk us through how that kind of came about?
Sure. We had already sort of been expanding in Chicago. So we have a downtown tour, which is primarily geared towards, I would say primarily towards tourists. We still have people that come in from the suburbs or from who also live in the city, who maybe their parents are in town or families in town and they come on the tour. But it's primarily geared towards tourists, and it's the route goes by a lot of the major hotels that are down there, and so it's easy for people to get to, and so that's a no-brainer. The next step, because a lot of these donut places were expanding outside of the downtown core into the neighborhoods, there's now enough donut places in some of the neighborhoods that we can actually run our own donut tour in a specific neighborhood. So we actually expanded to Wicker Park, which is another neighborhood here in Chicago. I live in Logan Square, which isn't very far away. And so we started the tour there. And so I had sort of not necessarily replicated from a different city, but essentially worked through the process of how do I expand hiring? How do I build another tour? How do I make sure the model is sustainable? And so we had already done that by the time that Neil, who's our guy in Philadelphia, by the time Neil reached out to us. And so we had sort of already worked through some of those logistics. Now, there's a whole bunch of other logistics and risks associated with starting a new city. I mean, I'm not there. I need to hire people who I can trust. I need to make sure that there's not a high rate of turnover. That's honestly my biggest fear is turnover when I'm not, for a city that I'm not there. So I need to figure out the right compensation model to make sure that hopefully they're not going to turn over on a regular basis. I also need to make sure that they are well trained, that they can be the brand. Thankfully, Neil is fantastic, and he's done news segments for us. He's done interviews for us. And it really, I mean, I want to make sure that it feels like a partnership, because I want to make sure that each of the managers in each city, that they feel that they have the autonomy to sort of like manage it like it is sort of their own business, but also that they understand the guardrails, but we're building a brand. Yeah. And we want to make sure that it's a similar experience in every city. It's always 4 donut stops over 2 hours, and we walk about 2 miles. And so we want to make sure that we have a consistent story and a consistent brand across each city. Now, obviously each city has their own unique situation and unique conditions, and we want to make sure that we're not inflexible, and we can account for that. But we also want to make sure that if somebody goes on the donut tour in Philadelphia or Chicago or New York City, that it's not going to be identical, but it has to be a similar experience and a similar feeling.
Yeah, I understand. And you mentioned earlier on expansion to Seattle, Portland, and New York City. Is that something you're planning, or is that operational now?
In the next, so I am going to New York City next week for final rehearsals. And then we're going to be launching in New York City probably, like, my guess is 3 weeks after that. So you'll probably see it in the press in a couple weeks. And then once I get back from New York City, I'm going to Seattle and Portland a week later, and we're going to do the same thing there. And we'll be launching there soon as well.
So I'm amazed that, so you hold down a pretty busy full-time job, and you are also running donut tours, not just in your backyard, but various cities across the US. And this is the thing for our European listeners: flying from New York City to Portland is a long trip. Was that like 6 hours or so, depending on changes?
It can be, yeah.
So how do you manage your time?
to be honest, right now I don't really sleep a lot. But I don't regret any of it, actually. I have always wanted to build a business of my own. I've always wanted to work for myself at some point in my career, and I can see the light at the end of the tunnel where that potentially could happen. And it's really exciting. It's really exciting. For many years I've worked for somebody else, and when you're putting in all these long hours and you're working over weekends or working over nights, and it's for somebody else, it can be fulfilling, but doing it for yourself is a whole different feeling. And it just gives me so much energy and excitement. And I'm quickly becoming the master of time zones. Even when so for instance, my wife and I we were in Singapore a couple months ago, and people were calling me at 10 p.m. in Singapore, which was 9 a.m. in Chicago, saying, where do I go for this tour? And what's going on? And where's the tour guide? And blah, blah, blah. And I'm answering the phone at some night market in Singapore. But I love every minute of it. And it's so much fun, and it's so exciting to be able to do this and to be able to, and again, like meeting all these great people on the tour, having all fantastic employees, like it just gives me a sense of fulfillment that just working a 9 to 5 for somebody else just doesn't. It's no comparison.
How challenging do you find it to stay healthy and full of energy, not just with all the hours you put into it, but also eating donuts?
Right.
I mean, are you one of these people that's just naturally healthy and energetic? Or
No. I mean, I said up front, I'm a fat kid at heart, and that's not just it's not a euphemism. I mean, I go to the gym probably. I have a trainer. I go every Monday morning. I also go to the gym probably like 3 or 4 more days a week beyond that. And,
right.
And I have to, it's not even because of the donuts. Like obviously the donuts are a part of it, but it helps me stay healthy to be able to do the rest of the stuff. I've just, for my own health, I've seen where if I don't go to the gym, I actually get sick more often. And when I do go to the gym, I am much more healthy than when I don't.
I always found that when I was running, I got my best ideas for various businesses and in my jobs. I always got the energy from that. In terms of tools and apps that you would say are indispensable to you in terms of running your business, what would they be? I
think the ones that I probably use the most are whatever ticketing platform you're on. Hopefully they have an app. It just makes it so much easier on your phone. I'm on Fair Harbor now, but I have for the last probably year, I have switched ticketing platforms every 3 or 4 months. I started on a platform called Ticket Leap, and then I moved to Peak, and then I moved to Fair Harbor, and now I'm getting hounded by Tripadvisor to go check out Woelker.
Yeah.
So each one has additional features and functionality. That's the reason I've switched. But I would say whatever ticketing platform you're on, make sure that they have an app. It just makes it so much easier on your phone to be able to book people or check on people or reschedule people, whatever you need to do. That's an important one. Obviously, all the social media apps, you need those depending on what channels you're on. For most tour operators, I would assume that Instagram is the primary social media channel. Probably followed then by Facebook. It will just depend on the tour. But for us, the primary one is Instagram. Everything has to be visual with a food business. Everything has to be beautiful and shot right, and that's why I don't do it. I have a wonderful social media person who handles it for me, and so I would say the ticketing platform and the social media channels are the two biggest for me. And obviously, then email is the third one because that's our primary form of communication.
Well, I know you're exceptionally busy, but I wonder in the future if you would like to come back on the show to talk about the various platforms, because I'm trying to host a panel with people that have used the different services that are out there, because I know tourpreneurs are getting hounded on the phone, cold calls and cold emails to switch platforms, and it can be very confusing. And I'd love to produce a show where we talk to actual tourpreneurs about their experience using the various platforms.
Happy to. Yep.
Brilliant. And what would you say is the best piece of advice anyone's ever given you with regards to running your business?
I think just throughout my career, just focusing first on the customer. That's regardless, so for instance, in college, and this was actually a reason that I started the business. I worked for Ben & Jerry's in college. Mm-hmm. And on the first day, when you work at Ben & Jerry's, they show you a training video. And I can't remember if it's Ben or Jerry that's in the video, but one of them is in the video. And what they say is, this business is all about the customer. You just need to continuously focus on the customer. One of the anecdotes that they have in there is they say that anyone who comes into an ice cream store is never upset. Everyone's always in a good mood when they come into an ice cream store. And I thought, that's 100% true. That's absolutely the truth. Yeah. And so I've taken that to heart, because for the most part, when people come on tours, they've already put up their money. They just want to have a good time. And that's all you have to fulfill on that. It doesn't seem like that much of an ask. You just need to make sure that you fulfill on the commitments of the tour, and then you make people happy and make sure they have a good time. And so that's just the relentless focus on the customer, just always listening to customer feedback and what else you could be doing for the tour, and understanding what is going to make, and staying, true to your central tenet. There's always going to be bells and whistles of, you should add this to the tour. You should do this for the tour. You should get a bus, or there's always going to be people that are going to throw out different things that you should be doing. And you need to weigh all that. But I think whatever customer feedback you get, you should absolutely 100% take that to heart.
Whose story would you like to hear on the Tourpreneur podcast next?
Oh my goodness. So there is a guy here in Chicago. His name is Steve Dolinsky. He is one of my, I would say, he's one of my idols when it comes to food and tours. He's a reporter here in Chicago, and he's focused on the restaurant scene here in Chicago. But he has become a pizza. I don't even know what the word is, guru, pizza mm-hmm. guru. And he recently he released a book. He runs a tour now here in Chicago. It's now one of the most reviewed and highest rated in Chicago. So wow. If you can get Steve on here, I would love to hear that.
What's the name of his tour?
It is Pizza City. I believe the book and the tour are both called Pizza City, or Pizza City USA, something along those lines.
Excellent. Well, I know I do have a trip coming up, hopefully in the next couple months, to Chicago. So I definitely want to come on your donut tour. I want to come on your on the pizza tour, and then I think I'm going to have to run a marathon on the Monday morning to burn
totally.
Everything off.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Where can people find out more about you and your tours?
They can go to undergrounddonuttour.com, or if that's too much to type in, you can just go to donuttour.com and it'll redirect you there.
Fantastic. Well, you're very busy. You're running all these tours around the United States, lots of expansion. So we're very grateful that you've given us almost an hour of your time tonight to share some of your wisdom in setting up your tourpreneurial business.
I really appreciate it. This has been great. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, I'm hungry. I'm hungry for donuts. And in fact, I've just booked the donut tour in Chicago. I'm going there in June for my birthday. I'm going to do the donut tour. I probably want to do the pizza tour, because who doesn't love pizza? I'm going to be double the size if you see me at the end of June. I'm going to have to add some more miles to my running regime. Hey, birthday, right? No, but seriously, I wanted to come back with 3 takeaways from fascinating conversation with Jeff. And there are a lot more than just 3 takeaways, but here's a couple that I kind of wrote down that resonated with me. So failing fast, I think, is really important. Whether you are a tourpreneur in waiting, so someone who's thinking about building a tour business, maybe a little nervous, maybe you've got this radical idea, as donuts is quite a radical idea, I think, a little different. Or you're a tourpreneur who wants to add a new tour or service to your existing product lineup. I think the case of failing fast is good. Get the website built. Jeff is using Squarespace. I've never used Squarespace. I'm a WordPress guy. I hear a lot of good things about Squarespace. And maybe if you're a Squarespace expert, I'd love to invite you on the show so you can share your knowledge with others who might want to build a website in there. But failing fast, we've heard other tourpreneurs on the show that use Meetup just to gauge reaction, interest to the tour, and get the feedback on the tour as well. So don't plan this for 2 years. Yes, you have to do some due diligence and you have to look into permitting if that applies. I also enjoyed it when he talked about the strengths of the different OTAs. I think that's important as well. As OTAs are now getting stronger and stronger in our markets, what's going to deliver you, which OTA is going to deliver you, what kind of business. So Jeff speaks glowingly of Tripadvisor, particularly giving him lots of US business. He's getting business now from Europe because he's working with Get Your Guide. And Klook from Asia are really flexing their muscles in this space. They are likely to bring you Asian business. Musement, Italian OTA, they got bought by TUI, which is a huge tour company in Europe. Be interesting to see what they do in the space as well. So, really do your research on all the different OTAs, look at their strengths and see what they can bring you. Now, I'm saying that because this is the travel space. I just put a little search into Google for Donut Tour Chicago. Now, the first site to come up is actually Get Your Guide. And they have an ad running. So Get Your Guide come first. Second is Jeff's direct site. So he's doing something right on his SEO. So go check out undergrounddonuttour.com because he's doing good things to come up there. First of all, he's even ahead of TripAdvisor Donut Tours listing. So Get Your Guide are spending money on advertising for the term Donut Tour Chicago. And yep, I click onto that. He's the only one. So he comes up first, Chicago Underground Donut Tour. So that's why he's getting business from Europe. But I'm sat here in New England making that search and look, they're coming up. So what I'm saying now about Get Your Guide being stronger from European standpoint, that will change as they get more aggressive in our own markets. And this is just an example. You could be in Australia listening to this. You know what I mean? I also think what was really important was his love of donuts. And I'm hearing this from a lot of tourpreneurs, a real passion, whether it's hiking in Asheville or Yoris with the battlefield tours. You can really hear from all the tourpreneurs we're interviewing and talking to that they have a passion for their subject. And I think that's really, really important for all of us to keep going, because as we know, it's a wonderful industry to work in, but it's tough, and it's tough to make a profit. Things don't happen overnight. So I think having that passion and looking for that passion in others, this is something else that comes across in the previous 6 or so interviews we've had on the show, is interviewing tour guides that share your passion. So they were just a couple of takeaways that I took, but I'll give you a fourth. It's a bonus one because this has come up quite a lot, and you probably won't get this out of business school either. Listen to your friends and your peers. Isn't it amazing how a lot of these businesses we've interviewed on Tourpreneur, it was their friends that were pushing them. So with Joris in Holland, his friends were like, you have so much knowledge about Operation Market Garden. You should be giving tours. Or in the case of Jeff, it was like, donuts. You're an expert on donuts. You're a champion of donuts. You should be out there giving tours on donuts. And look at the guy, right? He's starting in Chicago. He's opened up in New York. He's opened up in Philadelphia, Portland, Seattle, all this within 4 years. So it's just mind-blowing what can be achieved. But I really feel that it should be built on passion, not just about making money. So there we have it. A couple of takeaways from me. Thank you for tuning in to today's show. Really, really appreciate it. And as I said at the start, if you have any suggestions for Tourpreneur in terms of guests or stories you want to hear, or was there a question that I didn't ask Jeff that you were like, please ask him this? I deliberately didn't ask him what his favorite donuts were because, I'm always fighting the battle of the bulge, the waistline here. And and I know I'm going on that tour in a couple of weeks. But seriously, if there's anything that you want me to bring onto the shows and ask, just drop me an email at tourpreneurshow@gmail.com or go to tourpreneur.com. All the contact details are there. And please retweet the show, share it with others, share it on Facebook, share it with other people who you feel would be really inspired by today's interview with Jeff of the Underground Donut Tours. We'll see you soon. My name is Shane. This is Tourpreneur.
Thanks for listening to the Tourpreneur Podcast. Be sure to visit tourpreneur.com to join the conversation and access the show notes, including links to the resources mentioned on today's episode. This is Tourpreneur.